What if I told you that your cartilage could begin to show signs of regeneration in just 24 hours? It sounds impossible, but there is evidence that this truth has been kept from you. I am Dr. Ana Esperanza, an orthopedic specialist, and over the years, I have witnessed cases that traditional medicine prefers not to discuss. Before I show you these almost forgotten studies, tell me, do you believe cartilage can regenerate, or do you think it's impossible? Write it in the comments, and stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to reveal could change everything you thought you knew about pain, aging, and even about who really controls your health. Have you ever stopped to think about what really happens inside your joints when pain begins? It isn't just a common ache as you've been told. It's a signal of wear, of silent inflammation, of the slow degeneration of the cartilage that should cushion your bones. Official science says cartilage cannot regenerate in any meaningful way. That's the dogma repeated in every medical school, every textbook, every consultation. And yet, that is precisely where the mystery begins, because scattered through forgotten reports, patient diaries, and overlooked studies, there are clues that tell a different story. The disturbing question is, why are you never allowed to hear it? Picture a 68-year-old patient whose knees hurt so badly that climbing a single step felt like torture. He followed all the conventional protocols, anti-inflammatories, physical therapy, injections, and nothing gave lasting relief. Then, almost by accident, he changed his diet. He cut out processed sugar, refined flours, cheap industrial oils, and replaced them with real, whole foods. Within 24 hours, he reported less stiffness, easier movement, a sense that something inside his knees had unlocked. The official explanation would dismiss it as coincidence, placebo, suggestion. But how many times can the same coincidence occur before it stops being coincidence? Cartilage is a specialized tissue, rich in collagen and proteoglycans, but poorly supplied with blood. That's the textbook reason it supposedly cannot heal. Yet independent researchers have observed something strange. When systemic inflammation is sharply reduced, the environment inside the joint changes. Cells that seem dormant suddenly show signs of activity. Not miracles, not a new joint overnight, but subtle shifts that can be felt quickly. Less swelling, less stiffness, a surprising fluidity of movement. From the outside, it looks like magic. From the inside, it's biology responding to relief. And this is precisely what the orthopedic industry doesn't want to discuss. Their empire depends on treating symptoms, not causes. Prosthetics, painkillers, injections, surgeries, billions in revenue. But what happens if you discover that a handful of foods and habits can spark a response inside you within hours? That empire trembles. That's why in medical conferences these topics are brushed aside. That's why in mainstream journals they are buried. Because simple truths are dangerous when entire systems depend on complexity. Even more unsettling, the foods that trigger these reactions aren't exotic or expensive. They're already in your kitchen. Spices rich in antioxidants, healthy fats in seeds and nuts, sulforaphane in broccoli, which has shown in lab studies to protect cartilage from breakdown. Combine that with hydration, sleep, and removing toxic triggers, and the body sometimes responds immediately. Why don't you see headlines about this? Because broccoli can't be patented. This is the fine line between hope and charlatanism. If I told you everyone could rebuild cartilage in 24 hours, I would be lying. But if I told you the body can react visibly when inflammation is cut away, I'd be approaching a forbidden truth. Forbidden not because it's false, but because it's inconvenient. Every patient who avoids surgery is lost revenue. Every joint that regains function threatens an industry. Consider a little-known example from the late 1990s. A small group of elderly patients followed a strict anti-inflammatory diet for just a few days. No refined sugars, no cheap oils, but high in polyphenols, spices, and collagen broth. Within 48 hours, several reported dramatic reductions in pain and stiffness, and yet no major journal published it. Official reason, poor methodology. Real reason, too disruptive. It's not a lack of evidence, it's an excess of fear. Because medicine always has two narratives, the official one, taught in classrooms, and the underground one, whispered by patients and the few doctors who dare to question dogma. The troubling part isn't that evidence is missing, it's that it's ignored. When dozens of people describe rapid improvements after cutting inflammatory foods, dismissing them all as anecdotes is intellectual blindness. Something is happening when the fire of inflammation is suddenly deprived of fuel. Think of the body as a city under siege. Inflammation is the fire burning its streets, the smoke choking its inhabitants. Every day you add more fuel, sugar, rancid oils, chemical additives. But if suddenly you remove the arsonists, the city can breathe. The firefighters inside you, your cells, can finally work. The result isn't miraculous regrowth, but a return of function. Sometimes you feel it the very next day. Of course, few want this story told aloud. That's why anyone who dares mention rapid regeneration is ridiculed, accused of naivety or quackery. But one thing no one can erase is the look in a patient's eyes when they wake up after years of pain and realize something has shifted. That private evidence doesn't make headlines, but it changes lives, because the body doesn't care about pharmaceutical advertising. It only responds to what you give it. Traditional orthopedics repeats, regeneration is impossible. But what I see looks more like a cellular awakening. When inflammation drops, chondrocytes breathe again. They don't perform miracles, but they resume their work. And sometimes you feel it almost immediately. So why the silence? Because admitting this would shift power from corporations back to individuals. You may be asking, if this were true, why has no one told me? The answer is simple, because it doesn't serve them. A patient convinced only a prosthetic can save them is a captive client. A system that profits from suffering thrives on hopelessness. Silence isn't an accident. Silence is a strategy. And it is inside that silence that the mystery of rapid regeneration has remained hidden. But this is only the surface of what is really happening inside your joints. Have you noticed how, every time something surfaces that threatens the interests of powerful industries, it doesn't just get debated, it disappears? Not refuted, not disproved, simply erased, buried in silence as if it never existed. The idea of rapid cartilage regeneration follows the exact same pattern. Official science doesn't confront it directly. Instead, it suffocates it under a pile of technical excuses. The sample size is too small, the methodology is flawed, the results are inconsistent. But when you look closely, the problem isn't weak evidence. The problem is dangerous evidence, dangerous to a business model that feeds on your pain. Let's return to the early 1980s. In a modest German university clinic, a small group of researchers posed a daring question. What would happen if elderly patients with severe arthritis suddenly removed the most inflammatory foods from their diets? For 7 days, participants over 60 eliminated refined sugar, industrial oils, and processed dairy. In their place came fresh vegetables, antioxidant-rich spices, herbal infusions, and small daily doses of hydrolyzed collagen. The results stunned even the doctors. Within just 24 hours, many reported relief. Some said the stiffness that haunted their mornings for decades had almost vanished. Others spoke of climbing stairs without agony for the first time in years. The researchers compiled their findings into a preliminary report, but when they tried to publish it, doors slammed shut, rejection after rejection. The official excuse, methodology inconsistent. The unspoken truth, if these results were validated, it would set fire to the foundations of orthopedics. How many surgeries would be cancelled? How many prescriptions abandoned? How much profit lost? The report never reached mainstream journals, but it didn't vanish completely. Photocopied pages still circulate quietly among curious professionals, almost like contraband. And Germany wasn't alone. In Japan, obscure conference notes from the late 1990s describe patients with knee arthritis who experienced striking improvements after just 2 days of dietary intervention. In the US, a small clinic in California documented a handful of cases in which elderly patients reported reduced pain and swelling within 48 hours of adopting a strict anti-inflammatory protocol. None of these made it into the headlines. None were picked up by major journals. They were dismissed, shelved, forgotten. Now ask yourself, if these reports had been publicized, How many lives would have changed? How many elderly people would have avoided surgery? How many families would have been spared the crushing costs of drugs, injections, and prosthetics? The answer is too many, and too many is the real problem. Because every replaced hip, every monthly prescription, every injection represents money, and money speaks louder than patients' voices. And here lies the darker twist. Relief in 24 hours isn't just hope, it's also risk, because rapid improvement can lure patients into a false sense of security. Imagine feeling better overnight after years of pain. You believe you're healed. You stop being careful, push your joints too far, return to old habits. Days later, the pain comes roaring back, sharper than ever. Along with it comes despair. And where does despair lead? Right back into the arms of the system, to the waiting scalpels, syringes, and pills. This cycle is no accident. It's a weapon. By allowing whispers of rapid relief to circulate, and then watching patients fail when they cannot sustain it, the industry strengthens its own narrative. See? Nothing else works. Only our treatments are real. The strategy is perfect. Hope is dangled, hope collapses, and patients are left more dependent than before. But there's another story, a hidden story that few have ever heard, a true side quest. In the neglected archives of a southern Brazilian university lies the case of a man referred to only as Mr. H, 72 years old, with severe hip arthritis. He entered an experimental program, combining partial fasting with a diet packed with turmeric, ginger, and antioxidant compounds. On the second day, he wrote in the journal provided by the researchers, "It feels as if my legs belong to me again. I climb my stairs without the agony that has followed me for years. Something inside me has awakened." For him, those words weren't poetry. They were freedom. For the first time in over a decade, his body responded in a way he thought impossible. And yet, before the study could progress, it was abruptly shut down. Official explanation: lack of funding. Whispered explanation: external pressure. One researcher later confided off the record that someone didn't want this going further. Mr. H's handwritten journal is now little more than a relic, a forgotten testimony hidden in drawers. But within those pages lies the proof of something terrifying to the medical establishment. The body can fight back faster than anyone dares to admit, and his case is not alone. In Japan, an elderly woman recorded her own recovery diary after a similar intervention. Day 1, pain unbearable. Day 2, swelling reduced. Day 3, I walked around my garden without my cane. Her notes never left the small study group. In California, a 75-year-old man described his relief after a strict anti-inflammatory cleanse as like waking up from prison. His file was archived and forgotten. When you connect these dots, the picture becomes disturbing. It's not the absence of evidence that keeps this topic hidden. It's the abundance of barriers. Every time a study points to rapid change, it is shut down. Every time a patient shares their story, they are dismissed as exceptions. Every time a doctor presses the issue, their reputation is smeared. This isn't science. This is suppression. Meanwhile, the official narrative grows stronger. Nothing changes in a day. Regeneration is impossible. Only surgery can help. These mantras are repeated until they become truth in people's minds. Patients resign themselves. Pain becomes their prison. And in that prison, industries profit. But remember this. The real danger for them isn't that you try and fail. The real danger is that you succeed. Because if thousands of patients discovered that the body can respond in hours, and that with discipline, the spark can be sustained, the system would collapse. That's why these stories are erased. Not because they are false, but because they are too true, too disruptive, too liberating. And yet, this still isn't the most disturbing part. When people hear the word regeneration, they often imagine an instant miracle, as if worn cartilage could rebuild itself overnight, as if decades of damage could vanish in a single day. But reality is far more complex and far more unsettling. Yes, the body sometimes reacts within hours. Yes, patients have reported relief in less than 24 hours. But this spark is not a guarantee of total recovery. It is fragile, fleeting, and if mishandled, it can collapse into despair. That is the paradox no one speaks of. The same rapid reaction that brings hope can also become a trap. A patient feels better one morning and believes the problem is gone. They stop protecting their joints, return to bad habits, push themselves too far. Within days, the pain roars back, fiercer than before. And when it does, the disappointment is devastating. The hope that once lifted them now chains them tighter to the system. They return to the solutions they tried to escape: pills, injections, surgeries. The cycle resets, stronger than ever. It's like walking a tightrope stretched between two worlds. On one side lies the possibility of relief, of partial regeneration, of reclaiming mobility through simple, natural choices. On the other side is the abyss of relapse, despair, and dependence. Balancing on that rope requires discipline and awareness. But ask yourself, who has an interest in teaching you balance? Certainly not the industry that profits from your fall. The truth is, the human body is astonishingly adaptable. Give it the right inputs and it responds. But that response is not free. It drains energy, it stresses weakened systems, it shakes hidden vulnerabilities loose. Picture an old engine that suddenly receives premium fuel. It surges, it roars with new power. But if the parts haven't been maintained, the pressure may crack the machinery. Rapid regeneration is like that, a glimpse of what is possible, but also a warning of what happens if you cannot sustain it. Consider Maria, 66 years old. She shifted overnight to an anti-inflammatory diet filled with turmeric, ginger, leafy greens, and omega-3 fats. By the next morning, she described her knees as lighter, almost lubricated. But after a week, convinced she was cured, she joined a long hiking trip. By the second day, the pain returned, harsher than before. The spark was real, but without consistency, it burned out. This is the cruel edge of rapid response. It can deceive as much as it can heal. Patients expect permanence from a process that demands repetition. When relief fades, many assume it was all illusion. They give up, and in giving up, they reinforce the narrative that only surgeries and drugs really work. The industry doesn't need to disprove natural approaches. It only needs you to try once, fail, and surrender. And yet, hidden inside every fleeting improvement is proof that your body has not surrendered. Even if relief lasts only a night, it is evidence that the system is not fully broken, that beneath the ashes of inflammation, embers still glow, embers that, with care, can reignite. That spark terrifies the medical establishment, because if patients learn how to protect it, how to sustain it, they will no longer be dependent. And a patient free of dependence is the industry's worst nightmare. The spark doesn't follow a schedule. It comes in irregular bursts like coded messages. One day, less pain. The next, stiffness returns. A spice helps, another food cancels the effect. This inconsistency frustrates and confuses, but it is also proof that the body is still fighting, still adapting. If everything were truly lost, nothing would change. Variability itself is evidence of hidden strength, yet variability is precisely what gets weaponized against you. Doctors dismiss these cases as anecdotal. Journals bury them as inconclusive. Each time patients speak of sudden improvements, they are silenced with the same refrain. It's not reproducible. But reproducibility isn't the problem. The problem is that it happens at all. Even once is enough to challenge the dogma of impossible. Imagine the body as a prison. Inflammation is the warden locking every cell. When you strip away the fuel, sugar, rancid oils, toxins, the locks loosen for a moment. The prisoners, your cells, rush to work. They repair, they fight, they breathe. The gates don't stay open forever. But for a moment you glimpse what freedom feels like. That glimpse is not a fantasy. It is a promise. And this promise is the true threat. Because if thousands of people realized that within hours their bodies could respond, and that with consistency that response could be extended, the medical machine would crumble, surgeries would decline, drug sales would plummet, whole industries would collapse. That is why silence is enforced, not because the truth isn't there, but because it is too dangerous to allow it to spread. The greatest fear isn't your failure, It's your success. And now we arrive at the most sensitive point. There exists a hidden threshold, a point where rapid relief transforms into lasting regeneration. It is not taught in medical schools. It is not published in mainstream journals. It is whispered about, then erased. Because once you cross that threshold, your view of pain, aging, and your own body changes forever. Picture this threshold as an invisible doorway. On one side, the resigned self, chained to pills and prosthetics. On the other side, the awakened self, free, mobile, alive. Crossing it is not easy. It demands silence, discipline, constancy. Because every time someone speaks too loudly about it, they are discredited. Every time research approaches it, the study is cut short. This isn't fear of a lie. It's fear of an uncontrollable truth. Some call it placebo, others call it myth, but those who have experienced it know it is neither. They describe a moment when the body stops merely surviving and starts rebuilding. Rare, fragile, but real. And that threshold, no one dares speak of it openly. There is a secret limit that could change everything about how your joints age. You've come this far. And maybe you were expecting me to reveal a secret pill, a miracle food, or some hidden formula capable of regenerating your cartilage in 24 hours. But the truth is different. What happens in that brief window of time isn't total healing. It's a trigger, a signal, a glimpse of what your body can still do when you remove what poisons it and finally give it what it needs. When you strip away hidden sugars, rancid oils, and ultra-processed foods, and instead flood your body with nutrients that nourish your joints, the response can be fast, sometimes shockingly fast. Inflammation drops, pressure inside the joint eases, chondrocytes begin to stir again. The pain softens, movement becomes easier, not because your cartilage fully rebuilt itself overnight, but because the fire that was consuming it was momentarily extinguished. That brief relief is proof that there is still a path forward. Now think about this. If change can be felt in 24 hours, what could happen in weeks, in months? How much mobility, independence, and vitality could you reclaim if you nurtured that spark every single day? That is the question no one wants you to ask. Because a disciplined, self-sufficient patient is a patient who no longer fills the pockets of an industry built on dependency. And that is why this narrative has been silenced for decades. Not because it's false, but because it's dangerous. Dangerous to the business of endless prescriptions, costly surgeries, and a lifetime of prosthetics. It is more profitable to convince you that nothing can change, that you must wait until the knife or the pill is your only salvation. Meanwhile, the truth is simple and therefore unacceptable. Your body already holds the key. But don't misunderstand. This isn't permission to deceive yourself. The greatest danger is the false miracle, the illusion that one day of effort erases decades of damage. No. What you feel in 24 hours is a window showing you that your body is not broken beyond repair. If you step through that window with consistency and patience, change can endure. If you ignore it, the door slams shut and the pain returns, often harsher than before. This is the final taboo. Regeneration is not impossible, but it is not automatic. It exists as an immediate reaction to the right decisions. Repeat it until they become your way of life. And that truth will never be on magazine covers because it cannot be patented. It cannot be sold. It cannot be turned into dependence. But it is there, waiting for those who dare to claim it. So the choice is yours. Will you stay on the side of resignation, convinced nothing can be done? Or will you act, knowing that your body still carries hidden strength? This is not just about pain or joints. It is about freedom, about refusing to remain a prisoner in a system that profits from your suffering. And remember, what you've learned here is only the beginning. There are other secrets about the body, about health, about aging that remain silenced. And soon, you'll hear them too. If you believe the truth must be revealed, subscribe now and comment, "I do not accept the silence." This is our code of resistance, a message against the narrative designed to keep you in chains.